I'm Heather Mitchell, 32, and I never thought my own brother would be capable of such cruelty. We all agreed you're not in the wedding party, my brother said as he handed me a server's uniform. My heart dropped to my stomach as I stared at the black polyester vest and bow tie in my hands, the wedding I'd helped plan for months, the wedding I'd taken time off work for, the wedding I'd flown across the country to attend. And now, 3 days before the ceremony, I was being told I wouldn't be standing beside my twin brother Ryan, but serving drinks to his new in-laws instead. If you're shocked already, trust me, this story gets so much worse before it gets better. I'd love to know where you're watching from today as I share how my own twin brother betrayed me, and how karma eventually came full circle in the most unexpected way. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever experienced family drama, and let me know in the comments if you think I handled this situation right. Ryan and I were born 6 minutes apart. I came first, something I never let him forget throughout our childhood. Growing up, we had the typical twin connection that fascinated everyone around us. We finished each other's sentences, felt each other's pain, and once, when Ryan broke his arm falling from a tree, I woke up crying from a dead sleep even though I was at a sleepover 3 miles away. Our childhood wasn't perfect, but it was stable until we turned 15. That's when our parents announced they were getting a divorce. Mom had found evidence that Dad had been having an affair with his administrative assistant. The divorce was messy and painful, with Dad moving out immediately and Mom falling into a depression that lasted nearly 2 years. During that time, Ryan and I grew even closer. We became each other's support system, navigating the new reality of split holidays, weekend visitations, and the emotional roller coaster of watching our family fracture. I still remember sitting with Ryan on our roof outside his bedroom window the night Dad moved out, both of us making a pact that we would always have each other's backs. Mitchells stick together became our private motto. As we got older, I fell naturally into the role of the responsible twin. When we went to college, Ryan chose a party school across the country while I stayed closer to home to help Mom, who was still struggling. Ryan majored in business but spent more time socializing than studying. I lost count of how many papers I proofread for him over video calls at 2 a.m., or how many times I talked him through breakups and hangovers. After graduation, Ryan bounced between jobs, never quite finding his footing. I had settled into a career in marketing, and more than once, I helped Ryan with rent when he came up short. When he was laid off during company restructuring at 27, I let him crash in my spare bedroom for 3 months. When he went through a devastating breakup at 29, I was the one who flew out to help him pack up his apartment and move to a new city for a fresh start. I never minded being the stable twin. Ryan brought spontaneity and fun into my admittedly sometimes too structured life. He made me laugh harder than anyone else could, and despite his flaws, his heart was always in the right place. Then Ryan met Brittany Winters 2 years ago at a charity gala he attended for work. According to Ryan, it was love at first sight. Brittany came from old money. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels and several commercial properties on the West Coast. She was beautiful, educated at top private schools, and used to getting exactly what she wanted. The first time I met Brittany over video chat, I tried to keep an open mind. She was polished and poised, with the kind of confident smile that comes from never having to worry about your place in the world. Ryan was clearly smitten, talking over me and laughing too loudly at everything she said. I noticed right away how he changed around her, dropping names and places I'd never heard him mention before, as if he'd suddenly developed an interest in yacht clubs and winter homes in Aspen. 6 months into their relationship, Ryan called to tell me he was engaged. I was shocked at the speed but tried to be supportive. When he asked me to help plan the wedding, I immediately agreed. I assumed naturally that I would be his best woman or equivalent. Ryan and I had always talked about standing up for each other at our weddings someday. The planning began with enthusiasm. I took time off work to fly out for venue visits. I created spreadsheets, researched vendors, and had lengthy phone calls with Ryan about everything from menu options to music selections. Brittany was surprisingly hands-off about many details, which I initially appreciated. The first red flag appeared when I met Brittany's sister Madison. During a cake tasting, Madison made several comments about how quaint it was that I was so involved in my brother's wedding. "In our family," she said with a thin smile, "we usually hire professionals for this sort of thing. When I pointed out that I was doing this out of love, not financial necessity, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. After that, I noticed Brittany becoming more controlling about wedding decisions, often reversing choices Ryan and I had already made. Her family's wealth created an obvious power imbalance. Ryan, who had always been conscious about money, seemed especially vulnerable to their influence. When Brittany's father offered to pay for the entire wedding, Ryan was visibly relieved but also seemed to shrink somewhat in his future father-in-law's presence. As the months went on, Ryan began calling me less frequently. When we did speak, our conversations revolved almost exclusively around wedding tasks rather than the easy banter we'd always shared. I tried to connect with Brittany's family, sending thoughtful emails and making efforts to find common ground, but their responses were always polite and distant. Still, I remained committed to helping create Ryan's dream wedding. I took 3 weeks of vacation time to be available for the destination ceremony in Napa Valley. I spent a significant portion of my savings on airfare, accommodations, and wedding gifts. I even bought a dress I assumed would be appropriate for a maid of honor, though strangely, the topic of the wedding party had never been explicitly discussed. My mom, Linda, noticed the change in Ryan too. "He seems different," she said during one of our weekly calls. "Less like himself." My Aunt Carol was more blunt. After meeting Brittany at the engagement party, she pulled me aside and whispered, "That girl sees your brother as a project, not a partner." My cousin Emma, who coincidentally worked at the venue management company overseeing the wedding location, also expressed concerns. "The Winters family has a reputation," she told me cautiously. "They're big spenders but difficult clients. They tend to treat staff like they're invisible." Despite these warning signs, I remained optimistic. Ryan had always been easily influenced, but he had a good heart. I believed that once the wedding stress was over, my brother would return to being the person I'd known my whole life. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived in Napa Valley 3 days before the wedding, the scenery was breathtaking. Rolling vineyards stretched in every direction, and the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the elegant resort where the ceremony would take place. I checked into my room, freshened up, and headed to the welcome dinner, excited to finally be part of the celebration after months of long-distance planning. My first indication that something was wrong came when I saw the seating arrangement. I was placed at a table far from the main family section, seated with distant acquaintances of the Winters family whom I'd never met. When I approached Ryan to ask about it, he seemed distracted. "Oh, Brittany's mom handled the seating charts," he said with an unconvincing smile. "I'm sure it was just an oversight." Throughout the evening, I noticed Brittany's bridesmaids huddled together, taking selfies and laughing. I had assumed I would be part of this group, but no one invited me to join them. Later that night, scrolling through Instagram, I saw they had posted dozens of photos tagged Brittany's bride squad. There were 8 women in matching pajamas holding champagne flutes, and I wasn't one of them. The next morning, I attended the breakfast buffet and spotted Ryan sitting with Brittany's father. Their conversation looked intense, with my brother nodding repeatedly while Mr. Winters spoke in a low, authoritative voice. When Ryan saw me, he gave a quick wave but made no effort to invite me over. That afternoon, there was a wine-tasting event for the wedding party. I showed up in a sundress, excited to finally be included in pre-wedding festivities. Brittany looked surprised to see me. "Oh, Heather," she said, her voice artificially sweet. "This is actually just for the wedding party. But you can join us for dinner later if you want." I retreated to my room, confused and hurt. I called my mother, who seemed equally puzzled. "Maybe they're keeping the wedding party very small," she suggested, but I could hear the concern in her voice. The following day, just 3 days before the wedding, Ryan knocked on my hotel room door. His expression was uncomfortable, almost shameful as I invited him in. He held something black in his hands, which he kept folding and unfolding nervously. "Hey, sis," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "So, about the wedding." "Yes?" I prompted when he paused too long. "Is everything okay?" He took a deep breath and finally looked at me. "We all agreed you're not in the wedding party," he said as he handed me a server's uniform. The black polyester vest and bow tie felt heavy in my hands as I stared at them in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "There wasn't room in the wedding party," he explained weakly. Brittany has her sisters and cousins, and her family insisted on equal numbers, So your twin sister didn't make the cut? I finished for him, my voice cracking. It's not like that, he protested. It's just, the Winters are paying for everything, and they have certain expectations. And the uniform? I asked, still staring at the server's clothes in my hands. Ryan winced. One of the servers called in sick, and Brittany's mom suggested you could fill in. You're always so helpful, Heather. You know how to talk to people, and it would really save us in a pinch. The humiliation burned through me like fire. You want me to serve drinks at your wedding? After I helped plan every detail for months? After I spent thousands of dollars to be here? Don't make this about you, Ryan snapped, suddenly defensive. This is my wedding day. Can't you just be supportive for once without making everything about yourself? I stepped back as if he'd slapped me. In 25 years, through all our arguments and disagreements, Ryan had never spoken to me with such contempt. Get out, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He left without another word, leaving the server's uniform on my bed. That evening, still reeling from shock, I walked through the hotel gardens trying to clear my head. As I rounded a hedge, I heard familiar voices and instinctively stepped back. Brittany and Madison were sitting on a bench, wine glasses in hand. So she actually thought she'd be your maid of honor? Madison was laughing. That's priceless. Ryan warned me she was clingy, Brittany replied. Always trying to insert herself into his life. God, you should see her fashion choices. Everything screams clearance rack. Well, she'll look better in the server's uniform anyway, Madison snickered. At least black is slimming. I backed away silently, my hands shaking with rage and hurt. In my room, I called my mother, barely able to speak through my tears as I explained what had happened. Oh, honey, she said, her voice a mixture of shock and sadness. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. What do you mean? Mom sighed heavily. Ryan's been different lately. He called your father last month asking for a loan, a big one. When Dad couldn't help, Ryan was angry in a way I've never heard before. Why would he need money? I asked. Brittany's family is loaded. I think that's part of the problem, Mom said carefully. From what I understand, Ryan's been trying to keep up with their lifestyle. New clothes, expensive gifts. He mentioned something about investing in one of Mr. Winter's business ventures. The pieces began falling into place. Ryan wasn't just marrying into the Winters family, he was becoming financially entangled with them. He felt indebted, and that made him vulnerable to their influence in ways I hadn't fully understood. I sat on my bed, staring at the server's uniform. My first instinct was to pack my bags and leave immediately. But something stopped me, a mixture of sisterly concern and, if I'm being honest, a desire to understand just how deep this betrayal went. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying moments from our childhood, Ryan and I building forts in the living room, defending each other from playground bullies, celebrating our 16th birthday by getting matching tattoos of our shared zodiac sign, small, interconnected stars on our wrists that we'd promised would always remind us of our bond. I remembered the summer after our sophomore year of college, when Ryan developed pneumonia that landed him in the hospital. I took a leave of absence and spent 2 weeks sleeping in a chair beside his bed, managing his recovery when our parents couldn't be there. I remembered how I'd worked 2 jobs during my senior year to help cover Ryan's tuition when he lost his scholarship due to poor grades. These weren't sacrifices to me at the time, they were acts of love for my twin, my other half. The person who knew me better than anyone else in the world, or at least, the person I thought knew me. I texted my Aunt Carol, who was arriving the next morning. She had always been the family truth-teller, unafraid to point out uncomfortable realities that everyone else preferred to ignore. Her response came immediately, "Meet me for coffee at 9, Lobby Cafe." The next morning, Aunt Carol embraced me tightly before we sat down. Her expression was grave as she stirred her cappuccino. "I've been talking to some family members," she began without preamble, "and friends of Ryan's. I think you need to know what's been happening." What she told me over the next hour left me nauseous and lightheaded. According to Carol, Ryan had been systematically distancing himself from our family for months, but not just through absence. He'd been actively rewriting our family narrative to fit better with his new life. "He told Brittany's parents that you've struggled with jealousy issues since childhood," Carol said gently. that you've been dependent on him emotionally and financially, and that you have a history of trying to sabotage his relationships because you can't stand to see him happy. What? I gasped. That's completely backwards. I've always supported him. Carol reached for my hand. There's more. Your cousin Kevin ran into Ryan's old college roommate last month. Apparently, Ryan's been telling people that your parents favored you, that he had to work for everything while you were given opportunities. He's creating a narrative where he's had to overcome family obstacles to succeed. I shook my head in disbelief. This doesn't make sense. Why would he do this? I think he's trying to reinvent himself, Carol said. The Winters family has a certain view of the world. People are either assets or liabilities. Ryan wants to be seen as someone who's overcome adversity, not someone who's needed help. After coffee with Carol, I returned to my room, my mind spinning. On a hunch, I took out my laptop. Ryan and I had shared passwords since college, a habit born from the many times I'd helped him recover locked accounts. I hesitated only briefly before logging into his email. What I found confirmed everything Carol had said and worse. There were lengthy email exchanges between Ryan and Brittany discussing the Heather situation. In one particularly painful thread from 3 weeks ago, they explicitly discussed having me work as a server instead of including me in the wedding party. It solves 2 problems at once, Brittany had written. We don't have to explain why your sister is in all the photos to my extended family, and we save on the catering staff budget. Ryan's reply made me physically ill. She'll do it if I ask. Heather's always been a people pleaser. Besides, she owes me for all the times I've listened to her relationship drama. I found text messages showing that Ryan had agreed to the server role humiliation weeks ago, all while continuing to let me help plan the wedding. There were even discussions about limiting my time with certain relatives who might take my side if there was family tension. As the evidence mounted, I felt something inside me break. This wasn't just wedding party politics or bridezilla behavior. This was calculated cruelty from the person I trusted most in the world. Ryan hadn't just excluded me, he had actively conspired to humiliate me while rewriting our entire history. I called my mother again, barely holding myself together. I think you need to come home, Mom said after I shared what I'd discovered. This isn't healthy, honey. Let Ryan make his choices. I can't, I said, surprising myself with my resolve. I need to understand why, and I'm worried about Ryan. This isn't just about me anymore. I think he's being isolated and manipulated in ways he doesn't even recognize. My mother was quiet for a moment. Your brother has changed, Heather. I hardly recognize him anymore. Last month at dinner, he corrected me about details of your childhood things I lived through as your mother. It was like he'd constructed an entirely new past. What should I do? I asked, feeling lost. I can't tell you that, she replied softly. But I will say this. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to show them the truth, even when it hurts. After we hung up, I discovered an email showing Brittany's family had a pattern of isolating new spouses from their families. Brittany's older sister's husband hadn't spoken to his parents in 3 years. Her cousin's wife had been similarly separated from her support network. It was like reading a playbook for how controlling families operate. I sat at the desk in my hotel room, staring at the growing evidence of my brother's betrayal. I had 2 choices: leave now and cut my losses, or stay and find a way to break through to the twin brother I knew was still in there somewhere. The server's uniform still lay on my bed where Ryan had left it. I picked it up, feeling the cheap polyester between my fingers. Maybe, I thought, there was a third option. The next morning I knocked on Ryan's door. When he answered, his expression was guarded, as if he expected another confrontation. I'll do it, I said simply, holding up the server's uniform I'd neatly folded. Relief washed over his face. Really? That's great, Heather. Thanks for understanding. I forced a smile. What are sisters for, right? Just tell me where I need to be and when. As I walked away, I felt Ryan's eyes on my back. I wasn't sure if he was suspicious of my sudden compliance or just grateful to avoid another emotional scene. Either way, my decision to stay and play along gave me access I wouldn't have had otherwise. The wedding venue was truly spectacular, a historic winery with sweeping views of the valley, meticulously manicured gardens, and a grand stone building that housed the reception hall. In any other circumstance, I would have been impressed by the beauty of it all. Now, I saw only the excess, the ice sculptures that would melt by evening, the imported flowers that would die within days, the champagne towers that cost more than my monthly rent. While helping set up table arrangements, a task I'd been immediately assigned once I'd agreed to the server role, I ran into my cousin Emma, who worked for the venue management company. "I heard what happened," she said quietly as we arranged place cards. "That's beyond messed up." "You have no idea," I replied, keeping my voice low. "It gets worse." Emma glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "The Winters family has quite a reputation here. This is their third event this year, and the staff draws straws to avoid working their functions." "Why's that?" "They're impossible to please and treat the staff like garbage. Mr. Winters made a waitress cry last time they were here because she brought still water instead of sparkling." Emma hesitated. "They're also not as wealthy as they pretend to be." This caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but they've been late on payments for both previous events. My boss had to threaten legal action before they settled their last bill." Emma looked around again nervously. "There are rumors that some of their hotel properties are underwater financially. The economy hasn't been kind to luxury travel." This new information made me think. If the Winters family was struggling financially while maintaining an image of wealth, it might explain why they were so eager to have Ryan invest in their business ventures. Perhaps they saw him as a new source of capital rather than just a son-in-law. Throughout the day, I positioned myself strategically around the venue, listening and observing. I wore the server's uniform, which ironically made me almost invisible to the wedding party and family. People tend not to notice the help, and this worked to my advantage. Around midday, I overheard Ryan and Brittany arguing in a secluded corner of the garden. $50,000 is ridiculous for flowers alone," Ryan was saying, his voice tense. "Daddy already agreed to it," Brittany replied dismissively. "Besides, it's not like you're paying for it." "But I am," Ryan insisted. "Your father made it very clear that my investment in the new property development is linked to wedding costs. The more expensive this gets, the more I'm expected to contribute to the business." Brittany's laugh was cold. "Well, that's how family works, Ryan. We all contribute. You can't expect to marry into the Winters name without bringing something to the table." I moved away before they noticed me, but my mind was racing. Ryan was being financially pressured in ways I hadn't fully understood. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. It was about long-term financial entanglement. Later that afternoon, I managed to get access to the business center where copies of various wedding documents were being printed. When the coordinator stepped out to take a call, I quickly searched through the files and found a copy of the prenuptial agreement Ryan was scheduled to sign the next day. What I read made my blood run cold. The terms were completely one-sided. In the event of divorce, Ryan would receive nothing regardless of the length of the marriage. Any assets acquired during the marriage would be considered Brittany's sole property. Most alarmingly, there was a clause stating that Ryan agreed to invest a minimum of $200,000 in Winters family businesses within the first year of marriage, with no guaranteed return on investment. Ryan didn't have that kind of money. He would have to take out loans he couldn't afford to repay, essentially indebting himself to the Winters family for years to come. During dinner preparations, I overheard Brittany's father speaking to a business associate. "The Mitchell boy is eager to please," he said with a chuckle. "No family money to speak of, but he's got good connections in the tech sector we can leverage. Sometimes these marriages have unexpected benefits." I felt sick. They were talking about my brother like he was an acquisition, not a person. That evening, I was assigned to help in the kitchen during the rehearsal dinner. From my position serving drinks, I could see Ryan clearly. He looked uncomfortable in his expensive suit, laughing too loudly at Mr. Winters' jokes and repeatedly checking to make sure Brittany was happy. When our eyes met across the room, he quickly looked away, guilt flashing across his face. After my shift ended, I met secretly with Emma and another server named Jake, who had worked multiple Winters family events. "They did this before," Jake said, his voice low. "Brittany was engaged 3 years ago to a guy named Christopher. Same deal, big wedding planned. Guy got more and more isolated from his family. Then suddenly, wedding called off, but not before he'd invested in some Winters hotel renovation project. Lost everything when the deal went south." "The family has a pattern," Emma agreed. "They find someone eager to join their world, love bomb them, separate them from their support system, then use them financially. I spent that night reaching out to Ryan's old friends, most of whom hadn't been invited to the wedding. His college roommate Mark confirmed what Aunt Carol had told me. Ryan had been spreading falsehoods about our family dynamics for months, positioning himself as the underdog who had overcome family obstacles. It never made sense to me, Mark admitted over the phone. The Ryan I knew in college always talked about how close you two were, how you helped him through tough times. This new version of history only started after he met Brittany. By morning, I had compiled substantial evidence that Ryan was being manipulated and isolated as part of a pattern the Winters family had executed before. I also had documentation of the unfair prenuptial agreement and evidence of the financial pressure being exerted on my brother. The question was, what to do with this information? If I confronted Ryan directly, he might dismiss me as the jealous sister Brittany had painted me to be. If I did nothing, I might be watching my brother walk into a trap that would affect the rest of his life. I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror, the server's uniform hanging on the bathroom door behind me. After everything I'd discovered, I wasn't sure if I was trying to save my relationship with Ryan or save Ryan from himself. Maybe it was both. I want to pause here and ask if you've ever been in a situation where you discovered someone you love was being manipulated or controlled. It's such a difficult position to be in, wanting to help while knowing they might reject your concerns. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to hear more family stories like this one, because trust me, what happened next changed everything for both me and Ryan. I woke up on the day before the wedding with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the server's uniform I would be wearing. The question of whether to intervene in Ryan's life had kept me awake most of the night. Who was I to decide what was best for my 32-year-old brother? Yet how could I stand by and watch him be manipulated and potentially financially ruined? I met my mother for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. She had arrived late the previous night, and the dark circles under her eyes told me she had slept as poorly as I had. "I spoke with your father," she said quietly. "He's driving up today. We're both worried." "About me or about Ryan?" I asked. "Both of you," she replied, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Family loyalty is important, Heather, but there are limits. At some point, we have to let people make their own choices, even when those choices hurt us. Even when those choices might destroy them," I countered. Mom sighed. "That's the hardest part of loving someone, knowing when to step in and when to step back." Our conversation was interrupted by commotion from across the restaurant. Brittany's voice carried clearly as she berated a server who had apparently brought her the wrong breakfast order. "I specifically said egg whites only. Is that so difficult to understand? This entire weekend has to be perfect, and you're ruining it with your incompetence." The server, a young woman probably working her way through college, looked close to tears as she apologized repeatedly. Brittany continued her tirade until the restaurant manager appeared to smooth things over. Mom and I exchanged glances. "Is that what Ryan's signing up for?" she murmured. "That's just the beginning," I replied. "Wait until you hear the rest." I spent the next hour briefing my mother on everything I'd discovered: the prenuptial agreement, the financial pressure, the pattern of isolation, and the previous broken engagements. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. "I knew something was wrong, but this is beyond what I imagined," she said. "Have you shown Ryan any of this?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I'm afraid he won't believe me. Or worse, he'll believe me but choose her anyway." Mom was quiet for a moment. "You know, when you two were little, Ryan would never make a decision without checking with you first. Even for small things like which cereal to eat or which TV show to watch. He always valued your opinion, sometimes to the point where your father and I worried he was too dependent on you." "Well, that's certainly changed," I said bitterly. "Has it?" Mom asked. "Or has he just transferred that dependency to someone else, someone who doesn't have his best interests at heart?" Her insight struck me like a physical blow. Ryan had always been influenced by the people closest to him. The difference was that I had used that influence to support him, while Brittany and her family were using it to control and isolate him. Later that morning, I ran into one of Ryan's groomsmen, his college friend Jeff, who had just arrived. Jeff pulled me aside when he saw me. "Hey, what's with the uniform?" he asked, gesturing to my server's clothes. "I thought you'd be like, the female best man or something." I gave him the abbreviated version of events, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief. "That doesn't sound like Ryan," he said, shaking his head. "You two were always joined at the hip." "A lot has changed in 2 years," I replied. Jeff looked troubled. "Yeah, but cutting you out of the wedding party? That's cold, even for new Ryan." "New Ryan?" Jeff glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. "That's what we call him these days. The guy who shows up to drinks with an expensive watch he can't afford and talks about investment opportunities instead of making jokes. The guy who checks his phone constantly to answer Brittany's texts. The guy who somehow never has time for his old friends unless Brittany approves it first." As the day progressed, more family members arrived, including Aunt Carol, who wasted no time in confronting Ryan. I wasn't present for their conversation, but Emma texted me that she'd overheard parts of it while setting up floral arrangements. "Your aunt really let him have it," Emma's text read. "Something about him betraying his sister and forgetting where he came from. He didn't have much to say back." By mid-afternoon, the tension in the air was palpable. Ryan was avoiding not just me but most of our family, sticking close to Brittany or her father instead. During the setup for the evening's dinner, I overheard multiple conversations from relatives who were shocked at my exclusion from the wedding party and my assignment as a server. "It's humiliating," I heard my cousin Mark say to his wife. "Heather's been there for him through everything. This isn't the Ryan I know." The dinner that evening was a formal affair held on the winery's terrace. As I circulated with trays of appetizers, I noticed Ryan's increasing discomfort. He barely touched his food and kept tugging at his collar as if it were too tight. Brittany, by contrast, was in her element, holding court among her bridesmaids and laughing too loudly. At one point, I passed close to Ryan's table just as Brittany was describing the honeymoon plans. "Daddy's letting us use the jet to fly to Bali," she was saying. "We'll spend a week there, then 3 days in Singapore for that investment meeting with the Chans." Ryan looked startled. "Investment meeting? You didn't mention that before." Brittany waved her hand dismissively. "It's just a few hours, darling. Daddy says it's an opportunity we can't miss. The Chans are only in Singapore that weekend." I moved away, but not before catching the flash of frustration on Ryan's face. Even their honeymoon was being shaped by Mr. Winter's business interests. As the evening progressed, I found myself serving drinks to a table where Brittany's mother was sitting with several older women who appeared to be family friends. "Of course, they'll be living in the guest house on our property for the first year," Mrs. Winters was saying. "Just until they find a suitable place. Though I must say, I love having Brittany close by. I've already told Ryan that family dinners are mandatory on Sundays." "What about his family?" one of the women asked. "Do they live nearby as well?" Mrs. Winters' smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "No, they're scattered about, very independent people, the Mitchells. Not particularly close-knit, from what Brittany tells me. Not like us." I nearly dropped my tray. The casual rewriting of our family dynamics, making it seem like distancing Ryan from us was natural rather than orchestrated, was both calculated and chilling. After my shift ended, I met with Aunt Carol and my mother in Mom's hotel room. Dad had arrived and joined our impromptu council of war. "I think we need to show Ryan everything you've found," Dad said after I'd briefed them, "before he signs that prenup tomorrow morning." "He might not believe it coming from me," I replied. "He thinks I'm jealous and trying to sabotage his happiness." "Then it needs to come from all of us," Mom said firmly. "Together, as a family." "And if he still chooses Brittany?" I asked the question no one wanted to consider. Aunt Carol reached for my hand. "Then, that's his choice, honey. But at least it will be an informed one." Late that night, unable to sleep, I walked through the quiet hotel gardens. To my surprise, I found Ryan sitting alone on a bench, staring at his phone. "Hey," I said softly, hesitating to approach. He looked up, and for a brief moment, I saw my brother, not the polished facade he'd been presenting all weekend, but the Ryan I'd grown up with. He looked tired and conflicted. "Hey sis," he replied, patting the space beside him. I sat down, both of us quiet for a long moment. "Remember when we were 10 and we made that blood pact to always tell each other the truth?" I finally said. "Even when it hurt?" Ryan gave a small, sad laugh. "We used Dad's pocket knife and Mom was so mad when she found out. She was worried about infections, not the promise," I reminded him. She said the promise was the good part. Another silence stretched between us, more comfortable this time. I need to tell you something, Ryan, I said finally. Something important, and I need you to really hear me, like when we were kids and could finish each other's thoughts. He stared at the dark vineyard stretching before us, then looked down at his wrist where the faint outline of our matching tattoo was just visible in the moonlight. Okay, he said quietly, I'm listening. The morning of the wedding dawned with perfect, cloudless skies, the kind of weather that wedding planners dream about and couples pay thousands to predict. I woke early, my conversation with Ryan from the night before replaying in my mind. I hadn't told him everything. After promising to listen, he'd received a text from Brittany demanding his presence for some last-minute decision about the ceremony. He'd apologized, promised we'd talk later, and hurried away. The moment of connection had passed, leaving me uncertain whether I'd have another chance before he signed the prenuptial agreement scheduled for 10 a.m. I dressed in the server's uniform, no longer feeling the sting of humiliation quite as sharply. Today, the black polyester was almost a disguise, a way to move freely through spaces where guests in formal wear would be noticed and remembered. By 7 a.m., I was at the venue, positioning myself strategically as caterers and florists rushed to complete final preparations. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m., giving me precious hours to gather any remaining information and, hopefully, find a way to speak with Ryan alone. The bridal suite was buzzing with activity. Through the open door, I could see Brittany surrounded by her bridesmaids and 2 professional makeup artists. She looked beautiful but tense, snapping instructions about everything from the champagne temperature to the exact positioning of her veil. Not that tiara, she barked at her mother. The one Daddy bought in Paris. This looks cheap in comparison. Mrs. Winters scurried to comply, her expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. I noticed she kept checking her phone, seemingly waiting for an important message. On the opposite side of the venue, the groomsmen were gathered in a lounge area, already drinking despite the early hour. Ryan was notably absent. According to one of the wedding coordinators, he had been called to Mr. Winters' suite for some paperwork before getting ready. The prenup signing. It was happening early, perhaps deliberately scheduled when family members would be busy with preparations. I made my way to the wing of the hotel where the Winters had their suite, my heart racing. As I rounded the corner, I saw Ryan emerge from a room, his face pale. Mr. Winters followed, clapping him on the shoulder with a satisfied smile before returning inside. Ryan stood in the hallway for a moment, looking down at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. Then he walked quickly toward the garden exit. I followed at a distance, watching as he made his way to a secluded bench partially hidden by ornamental trees. Taking a deep breath, I approached. Ryan? He looked up, startled, then gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, Heather, shouldn't you be helping with something? I needed to talk to you first. Did you just sign the prenup? His expression closed off immediately. That's private, between me and Brittany. Is it? Or is it between you and her father? Ryan stood abruptly. I don't have time for this. I need to get ready. You have 9 hours until the ceremony, I pointed out. Please, just give me 10 minutes. After everything we've been through together, don't I deserve at least that? Something in my tone must have reached him because he sat back down, though his posture remained defensive. 10 minutes, he agreed reluctantly. I sat beside him. Did you read every page of what you just signed? He shifted uncomfortably. Of course. It's standard stuff, protecting both of our interests. Including the clause about investing $200,000 in Winters' family businesses within a year? Money you don't have? Ryan's head snapped up. How do you... Or the section stating that all assets acquired during the marriage, regardless of who earns them, belong solely to Brittany? Or the part where you get nothing, not even items you owned before marriage, if you divorce? You had no right to look at that document, Ryan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe not, I agreed, but I do have the right to care about my twin brother. The person who promised we'd always have each other's backs. The person who's been spreading lies about our family to impress his fiancée. Ryan flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You told Brittany's family I was jealous and clingy. That I tried to sabotage your relationships. That our parents favored me and you had to struggle for everything. I fought to keep my voice steady. We both know that's not just untrue, it's the exact opposite of our reality. Ryan looked away, guilt washing over his features. It's complicated, Heather. Brittany's family. They have expectations. They wouldn't understand our family dynamics. You mean they wouldn't accept the truth, that you've struggled financially and emotionally, and your family has always supported you. That doesn't fit their narrative of marrying into good stock. Ryan was silent, staring at the ground. Do you know Brittany has been engaged before? I asked quietly. 3 times, actually. His head jerked up. What? No, that's not possible, she would have told me. Like she told you about the investment meeting she scheduled during your honeymoon? Or how her family is planning for you to live in their guest house indefinitely? Or how they expect you to cut ties with your independent family who supposedly isn't close-knit? Ryan's face paled further. How do you know all this? Because while you've been avoiding me, I've been listening. To her family, to the staff who've worked their previous events and seen this pattern before. I took a deep breath. Her last fiancé, Christopher, invested in a Winters hotel renovation right before their wedding. When the engagement ended, he lost everything. Sound familiar? Ryan stood again, pacing in front of the bench. This is insane. You're making Brittany sound like some kind of predator. Not Brittany. The Winters family. They've done this before, Ryan. They find someone eager to join their world, isolate them from their support system, then use them financially. I love her, Ryan said, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. Maybe you do, but do you even know who she really is anymore? The woman who asked you to humiliate your twin sister by making her serve drinks at your wedding? The woman who laughs about your budget fashion choices behind your back? Ryan stopped pacing. She wouldn't do that. I heard her, Ryan. With Madison in the garden, they were laughing about how I thought I'd be your maid of honor, about how the server's uniform would be slimming at least. I could see doubt creeping into his expression. I pressed on, pulling out my phone. I have screenshots of emails between you two discussing the Heather situation. I know you agreed to the server role weeks ago. I know you've been lying to me while I spent thousands of dollars and took vacation time to help with this wedding. My voice broke slightly. What I don't know is why. What did I ever do except support you? Ryan sank back onto the bench, his head in his hands. I didn't know what to do, he whispered. When I met Brittany, it was like entering a different world. Everything was perfect, the houses, the cars, the connections. For once in my life, I wasn't the screw-up twin who needed bailing out. So you decided to become someone else? Someone who would treat his sister like this? Ryan looked up, his eyes wet. Her family. They made it clear there were expectations. They talked about family legacy and appearances. Mr. Winters started bringing up business opportunities, investments. I was in over my head before I realized it. And now you've signed a document legally binding you to give them money you don't have. Ryan nodded miserably. I already took out a loan against my $401k and maxed out 3 credit cards for the engagement ring and prenup legal fees. We sat in silence for a moment. Have you noticed how Brittany's family treats service staff? I asked gently. Ryan frowned. What do you mean? The way they speak to waiters, housekeeping, the wedding coordinators, like they're not even human. They're just particular about what they want, Ryan defended, but weakly. Is that how you want to live? With people who think it's acceptable to make others feel small? Who decided your twin sister belonged in a server's uniform rather than standing beside you on one of the most important days of your life? Ryan was quiet again, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Emergency. Brittany's suite. Come now. I have to go, I told Ryan, standing quickly. Just don't do anything until we talk again, promise me. He nodded, still looking dazed by our conversation. I hurried to the bridal suite, finding Emma waiting outside. What's wrong? I asked. Emma pulled me into an alcove. I was delivering the bouquet samples for final approval when I overheard Brittany on the phone with her mother, she whispered. They were discussing plans for after the marriage. Brittany said, and I quote, "Once the papers are signed, we can phase out the Mitchell problem. Ryan will be too invested to back out when we tell him his family isn't welcome at holiday gatherings." My blood ran cold. They're planning to cut us off completely. Emma nodded. There's more. Her father was in the adjoining room on another call about handling the Mitchell situation. Something about redirecting Ryan's inheritance from his grandparents into a family trust they control. This was worse than I'd imagined. Not just isolation, but financial exploitation on a level that would affect Ryan for decades. I need to find the prenup, I said, thinking fast. There has to be a way to invalidate it. Emma hesitated. My boss has a copy in the event office. For the payment arrangements, I could create a distraction. 20 minutes later, I was scanning through the document, my hands shaking. The terms were even more draconian than I'd initially thought. Not only would Ryan receive nothing in a divorce, but he had agreed to consulting fees payable to Mr. Winters for any business opportunities that came his way during the marriage. His future earnings weren't just at risk, they were effectively promised to the Winters family. I took photos of the most damning sections, then returned the document with Emma's help. As I left the office, I nearly collided with one of Ryan's groomsmen, Jeff, his college roommate. Heather! I've been looking everywhere for you, he said, pulling me into a quiet corridor. Something weird is going on. Ryan's acting super nervous, and I just overheard Brittany's brother talking about Ryan's gambling debts to him. 50 grand worth. Did you know about this? I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Gambling debts? Ryan doesn't gamble. Jeff looked grim. Apparently he started a few months ago. Weekend trips to Vegas with Brittany's brother. I think they set him up, Heather. Got him in deep, then offered to help if he'd sign some business partnership documents. This explained how they'd gained such financial leverage so quickly. Ryan wasn't just emotionally manipulated, he was being blackmailed. I checked my watch. It was nearly noon. The ceremony was in 4 hours and guests would start arriving in 2. I needed to find Ryan immediately. I located him in his suite, surrounded by groomsmen who were joking and drinking. He looked up when I entered, his expression a mixture of relief and anxiety. Can we talk? I asked. Privately? The other men exchanged glances, but Ryan nodded. Give us a few minutes, guys. Once we were alone, I showed him everything, the prenup photos, the texts from Emma about Brittany's conversation, Jeff's information about the gambling debts. Ryan listened in silence, the color draining from his face. When I finished, he walked to the window and stared out at the vineyard where white chairs were being arranged for the ceremony. I kept telling myself it would get better after the wedding, he said finally. That the pressure would ease once we were married. That Brittany and I could establish our own life, separate from her family's influence. He turned to face me. I was lying to myself, wasn't I? I nodded gently. I think you were. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. What do I do now? The wedding is in 4 hours. 300 guests are coming. I signed that prenup this morning. You talk to Brittany, I said simply. Alone, without her family present. Show her what we've discovered and see how she reacts. If she truly loves you, she'll be horrified by her family's manipulation and willing to postpone until you can renegotiate terms that are fair to both of you. Ryan nodded slowly. And if she doesn't? I met his gaze steadily. Then you'll have your answer about what this marriage would really be. Ryan arranged to meet Brittany in the winery's private tasting room, neutral ground away from both their suites and the prying eyes of family members. I waited anxiously in a staff area nearby, having promised Ryan I wouldn't interfere but would be available if he needed support afterward. Through the service corridor, I could see them enter the room. Brittany looked radiant in a silk robe, her hair and makeup already done for the ceremony. Ryan, by contrast, looked pale and determined, a folder of documents clutched in his hand. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see their expressions through the glass panel in the door. Brittany's face shifted from annoyance at being pulled away from preparations, to confusion, then to defensive anger as Ryan presumably showed her the evidence we'd gathered. She shook her head repeatedly, gesturing emphatically. After about 20 minutes, her voice became loud enough to carry through the door. So this is all because of your sister? She's been filling your head with lies because she's jealous. I told you she would try to sabotage us. Ryan's response was too quiet to hear, but his posture remained firm. He pointed to something in the documents, likely the prenup terms. Brittany's mask slipped then, her beautiful features contorting with rage. That's standard language. Daddy's lawyers assured me it protects both of us. Ryan said something else. and Brittany's expression changed again, calculation replacing anger. She moved closer to him, placing her hand on his arm, her body language softening. She was switching tactics, trying to win him back with affection rather than aggression. For a moment, Ryan seemed to waver. I held my breath, recognizing the pattern from our childhood when Ryan would cave under emotional pressure. But then he straightened his shoulders and stepped back from her touch. Brittany's sweet demeanor vanished instantly. Fine, you want to know the truth? Yes, we have expectations for this marriage. The Winters name means something. We're not about to let some nobody from a broken family dilute our legacy without bringing something valuable to the table. Even through the door, I could see Ryan flinch at her words. But he remained steady, saying something that made Brittany's face flush with fury. You can't back out now, she nearly shouted. Do you have any idea how much this wedding is costing? How embarrassing it would be? Daddy will destroy you financially if you try to call this off. Ryan's response was again too quiet to hear, but the way Brittany recoiled suggested it was something she hadn't expected. She stormed toward the door, yanking it open and nearly colliding with me in the service corridor. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. You, she spat. I knew you were behind this. You couldn't stand to see your brother happy, could you? Had to make him as miserable and lonely as you are. Before I could respond, Brittany's father appeared at the end of the hallway, his expression thunderous. What's going on here? He demanded, striding toward us. Brittany, you should be getting ready. The photographer wants to start bridal party photos in 30 minutes. Ask them, Brittany said, gesturing sharply at Ryan and me. Your future son-in-law is having second thoughts, thanks to his interfering sister. Mr. Winters' gaze locked onto Ryan with frightening intensity. Is this true? After everything we've done for you? Ryan stood his ground, though I could see him trembling slightly. I think we need to postpone the wedding, sir. There are too many issues that haven't been properly addressed. The prenuptial agreement is legally binding and signed, Mr. Winters cut in. As are the loan documents for the $50,000 my son covered for your gambling losses. Gambling losses that were orchestrated, I interjected, unable to stay silent. Your son deliberately got Ryan into games he couldn't win, then offered to help him cover the debts. Mr. Winters barely spared me a glance. Ridiculous accusations from a jealous sister who can't stand to see her brother move up in the world. Ryan, be sensible. You're about to marry into one of the most influential families on the West Coast. Don't throw that away over pre-wedding jitters and family dramatics. By now, our raised voices had attracted attention. Brittany's mother appeared, followed closely by several bridesmaids and Ryan's groomsmen. The narrow corridor was becoming crowded with confused wedding participants in various states of formal dress. What's happening? Mrs. Winters asked, looking between her husband's angry face and her daughter's tears. Ryan wants to postpone the wedding, Brittany said, her voice breaking dramatically. He says he can't go through with it today. A ripple of shocked murmurs ran through the gathered crowd. Postpone? Mrs. Winters echoed, her hand flying to her throat. But the guests, the arrangements, everything is paid for. Not quite everything, said a new voice. My mother pushed through the crowd, my father and Aunt Carol right behind her. The final venue payment was due this morning. Strangely enough, it seems the check bounced. All eyes turned to Mr. Winters, whose complexion had reddened considerably. A banking error, he said dismissively. Being resolved as we speak. Like the banking error from your last event here? Emma asked, suddenly appearing beside me. And the one before that? My boss has been trying to reach you all morning about the payment issue. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Guests who had arrived early were now peering curiously toward the commotion. Wedding coordinators hovered anxiously at the edges of the crowd, clearly uncertain whether to continue preparations. This is a private family matter, Mr. Winters said through clenched teeth. I suggest everyone return to their duties while we sort this out. I'm not going through with the wedding today, Ryan said, his voice gaining strength. Not until we've renegotiated the prenup and clarified the business arrangements. I want my own lawyer present, not one chosen by your family. Brittany let out a sound between a sob and a scream. You can't do this to me. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? More humiliating than making my sister serve drinks at our wedding? Ryan asked quietly. More humiliating than lying about my family to make yours feel superior? Mr. Winters stepped closer to Ryan, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper that I could barely hear. You signed binding documents this morning. If you try to back out now, I will personally ensure you never work in this state again. The loan comes due immediately. Your credit will be destroyed. Your career will be over before it begins. I moved protectively toward my brother, but Ryan held up a hand to stop me. For the first time in months, I saw clarity and determination in his eyes. Actually, sir, he said with surprising calm, I've been recording this entire conversation on my phone. He pulled his cell from his pocket, the screen showing an active recording, including that threat you just made. I'm sure the proper authorities would be interested in hearing about how you and your son engineered gambling debts to pressure me into business arrangements. Mr. Winters' face went from red to purple. You wouldn't dare. I've already sent a copy to my email and my sister's, Ryan continued. As for the prenup, I had a very interesting call with a lawyer friend of Heather's while you were threatening me. Prenuptial agreements signed under duress, or with inadequate legal representation, are frequently invalidated in court. Brittany stepped forward, her perfect makeup now streaked with tears. Ryan, please, we can work this out. Daddy gets carried away sometimes, but he means well. I love you. For a moment, Ryan's expression softened, and I feared he might give in, but then he shook his head. I don't think you do love me, Brittany. I think you love the idea of molding me into someone your family approves of. That's not real love. The silence that followed was broken by the wedding planner pushing through the crowd, her clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Guests are arriving, and they're asking why there's no one greeting them. The ceremony is scheduled to start in less than 3 hours. All eyes turned to Ryan, the final decision clearly his to make. He took a deep breath, looking from Brittany to her parents, then to me and our family. The wedding is off, he said firmly. Please inform the guests and offer my sincere apologies. What followed was controlled chaos. Mrs. Winters collapsed dramatically into a chair, wailing about the expense and embarrassment. Mr. Winters made several threatening phone calls, his face still an alarming shade of purple. Brittany locked herself in the bridal suite, refusing to speak to anyone. The wedding planner, showing remarkable professionalism, quickly organized staff to inform arriving guests that the ceremony had been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Some guests, particularly those from the Winters side, were outraged. Others, especially Ryan's friends who had witnessed his personality change over the past months, seemed more relieved than surprised. Amidst the turmoil, Ryan pulled me into a quiet corner of the garden. Thank you, he said simply, his voice thick with emotion, for not giving up on me even when I treated you terribly. I hugged him tightly. Mitchells stick together, remember? Even when one of them is being a complete idiot. He laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in months. I've made such a mess of everything. The financial implications alone. He trailed off, looking overwhelmed. We'll figure it out, I promised. One step at a time. As afternoon turned to evening, what should have been a wedding reception became instead a small gathering of the Mitchell family and Ryan's closest friends in a private dining room at the hotel. The mood was subdued but supportive as Ryan explained everything that had happened. I lost myself, he admitted, looking around the table at the people who truly cared about him. I got caught up in their world, their expectations. I started believing I needed to be someone else to be worthy. You were always worthy, Mom said, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Just as you are. Later that night, as things were finally calming down, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. You won't believe this. Just overheard the venue manager talking. Brittany was previously engaged to 3 different guys. All weddings canceled last minute. All 3 exes invested in Winters family businesses right before the breakups. This is their pattern. I showed the text to Ryan, who stared at it for a long moment before shaking his head with a rueful smile. I should feel devastated, he said. Instead, I just feel free. The days following the canceled wedding were a blur of logistics, legal concerns, and emotional processing. Ryan moved temporarily into my spare bedroom, a reversal of our usual pattern while we sorted through the aftermath. The morning after the non-wedding, Ryan sat at my kitchen table, his head in his hands, as we made a list of all the financial and legal entanglements that needed to be addressed. The gambling debt is the most immediate concern, he said, his voice strained. They can demand payment in full now that I've backed out of the wedding. We need a lawyer, I replied, already searching for options on my laptop. One with experience in both contract law and potential fraud cases. Through a colleague's recommendation, we connected with Patricia Alvarez, an attorney who specialized in complex financial disputes. After reviewing the evidence we'd gathered, including Ryan's recording of Mr. Winters' threats, she agreed to take the case. This isn't my first rodeo with the Winters family, Patricia told us during our initial consultation. I represented a commercial vendor who had similar issues with their payment practices 2 years ago. They rely on intimidation and their reputation to silence people, but their legal position is often weaker than they pretend. With Patricia's guidance, Ryan sent a formal letter to the Winters family outlining his position. He was willing to repay any legitimate debts but would contest the gambling losses on the grounds of potential fraud. Additionally, he would seek to have the prenuptial agreement invalidated due to undue pressure and inadequate independent representation. The response was immediate and hostile. Mr. Winters called Ryan directly, threatening not only legal action but also to spread rumors that would damage his professional reputation. Ryan, following Patricia's advice, simply recorded the call and added it to our growing file of evidence. They're counting on you being too afraid or embarrassed to fight back, Patricia explained. Most people just take the loss rather than go up against a family with their resources. But that recording changes the dynamic considerably. Meanwhile, Brittany launched a social media campaign painting herself as the victim of a heartless groom who'd left her at the altar. Her carefully curated posts featuring artfully applied tears and supportive family members generated considerable sympathy from those who didn't know the full story. Should I respond? Ryan asked me after particularly vicious comments appeared on his professional profiles. No, I advised. Engaging publicly only extends the drama. Let Patricia handle the legal side and we'll deal with personal fallout privately. A week after the canceled wedding, we received unexpected support. One of Brittany's former fiancés, Christopher Rivera, reached out to Ryan after hearing about the situation through mutual connections. The same thing happened to me, Christopher confirmed during a video call. Luxury wedding planned, pressure to invest in their hotel renovation, sudden changes to the prenup right before the ceremony. When I tried to negotiate better terms, Mr. Winters threatened my business contacts. I caved and signed, then lost everything when the engagement mysteriously fell apart 3 weeks later. Christopher agreed to provide a sworn statement about his experience, as did another ex-fiancé who came forward after hearing about Ryan's situation. Both men described nearly identical patterns of financial and emotional manipulation. These testimonies strengthened our legal position considerably. Patricia was able to negotiate a settlement. Ryan would repay the legitimate loans he had received, but the gambling debts were forgiven in exchange for his silence about the Winters family's business practices. The prenuptial agreement was formally voided. They're more concerned about their reputation than the money, Patricia explained. Your evidence, combined with the statements from the exes, could cause serious damage if it became public. They're cutting their losses. The financial resolution, while a relief, was just one aspect of Ryan's recovery process. The emotional toll of the betrayal and manipulation ran deeper. I don't know who I am anymore, he admitted one night, a month after the wedding that wasn't. I spent so long trying to be what they wanted that I lost track of myself. You're still you, I assured him. The real Ryan is still in there. The person who loves bad sci-fi movies and makes terrible puns and would give someone his last dollar if they needed it. Ryan started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping people recover from manipulative relationships. Slowly, I began to see glimpses of my brother returning his genuine laugh, his spontaneous generosity, his ability to make fun of himself. Our family rallied around him in ways that directly contradicted the false narrative he'd been pressured to create about us. Mom and Dad, despite their own complicated history, coordinated to help Ryan navigate his financial recovery. Aunt Carol checked in daily with her particular brand of tough love and unwavering support. The Winters family showed me exactly what I don't want, Ryan reflected as he began putting his life back together. A family where appearances matter more than authenticity, where control is mistaken for love, where relationships are transactions. The media attention from the canceled wedding of a wealthy family created another unexpected challenge. Several gossip websites picked up the story, spinning various versions of what had happened. Ryan received calls from journalists seeking his side of the story, some offering substantial payments for exclusive interviews. "I'm not interested in prolonging this publicly," he decided after considering these offers. "The best revenge is moving forward with integrity." Brittany made one last attempt to reconnect with Ryan about 2 months after the canceled wedding. Her text message struck a conciliatory tone. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. Maybe we rushed things. Would you be willing to talk? Just us, no family involved." Ryan showed me the message, his expression troubled. "Part of me still cares about her," he admitted. "I keep wondering if she was as trapped in her family's expectations as I was." "That's your decision," I told him. "But remember who she revealed herself to be when things didn't go according to plan." After careful consideration, Ryan declined Brittany's invitation. "I wish you well," he wrote back simply, "but I think we both need to move forward separately." 3 months after the non-wedding, we received news that Brittany was engaged again, this time to the son of another wealthy family with business ties to the Winters hotels. The announcement appeared in several society publications, with no mention of her previous engagement to Ryan. "Poor guy," Ryan said when he saw the news. "I hope he sees the red flags I missed." As fall turned to winter, Ryan moved into his own apartment and returned to work with a renewed focus on building a career based on his actual interests, rather than impressing others. The financial aftermath of the Winters entanglement would take time to fully resolve, but his path forward was clear. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't intervened," he told me over dinner one evening. "If I'd gone through with the wedding." "You would have figured it out eventually," I said, believing it. "Maybe not immediately, but the real you would have surfaced sooner or later." Ryan shook his head. "I'm not so sure. They were very good at what they did, isolating me, making me doubt myself and my family, creating financial dependency. By the time I realized what was happening, I might have been in too deep to escape." The server's uniform that had been the catalyst for so much change hung in my closet, a strange souvenir of the ordeal. Sometimes I looked at it and marveled at how a single moment of humiliation had led to my brother's escape from a potentially destructive marriage. "You should frame it," Ryan joked when I mentioned this to him. "Like a trophy." "Maybe I will," I replied, only half kidding. A reminder to always value myself and trust my instincts. The healing wasn't linear, and there were setbacks along the way. Ryan still had moments of doubt and regret. The financial consequences would take years to fully resolve. But with each passing month, the fog of manipulation lifted further, revealing the twin brother I had always known and loved. "I'm sorry," he said one evening, the words seemingly coming out of nowhere, as we watched a movie at my apartment. "For everything. For the lies, for the server uniform, for pushing you away." "I know," I said simply, because I did. The Ryan sitting beside me was real again, flawed and human and authentic in all the ways that mattered. "Mitchells stick together," he said, echoing our childhood pact. I smiled, feeling the weight of the ordeal finally beginning to lift. "Always." "I can't believe you actually framed it," Ryan laughed, pointing at the shadow box hanging on my living room wall. Inside was the black polyester server's vest and bow tie, mounted against cream-colored linen with a small engraved plaque that read, "The day truth served justice." "It's a conversation piece," I replied with a grin, handing him a glass of wine, "and a reminder that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes." We were meeting at Giovanni's, our favorite childhood restaurant, to mark the 1-year anniversary of the wedding that never was. So much had changed in those 12 months that it sometimes felt like we were discussing events that had happened to different people entirely. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked as we settled into our usual booth. "Not going through with the wedding?" Ryan considered the question seriously, swirling the wine in his glass. "I regret hurting people," he said finally. "The guests who traveled, the relatives who were excited for me, but the wedding itself?" He shook his head firmly. "Not for a second." The financial aftermath had been significant, but not insurmountable. Ryan had needed to take out a legitimate loan to repay the money he'd borrowed from Mr. Parisi BSD. Winters, creating a payment plan that would take several years to complete. His credit score had taken a hit, and he'd had to downsize his lifestyle considerably. "Best thing that ever happened to me, honestly," he reflected. living within my actual means instead of trying to keep up with the Winterses. It's like I can breathe again. The legal entanglements had been fully resolved 6 months earlier when the Winters family, facing scrutiny over their business practices from multiple sources, agreed to a final settlement that released Ryan from any remaining obligations in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement about specific aspects of their interactions. Patricia thinks they're under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission, Ryan said, referring to our lawyer. Apparently, we weren't the only ones asking questions about their business methods. The most profound changes, however, had been internal. Ryan had continued his therapy, working through the layers of manipulation and self-doubt that had accumulated during his relationship with Brittany. My therapist says I was a perfect target, Ryan explained, sipping his wine. Insecure about my finances, eager to please, history of seeking validation from others. The Winters family spotted those vulnerabilities immediately. You're not giving yourself enough credit, I countered. You recognized the truth when it mattered most. That took real courage. Ryan smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes, something I'd missed during those months when his smiles had been practiced and performative. I couldn't have done it without you, he said. When I think about how close I came to cutting you out of my life completely, he shook his head, unable to finish the thought. We ordered our usual dishes, lasagna for him, eggplant parmesan for me, and fell into comfortable conversation about lighter topics. My recent promotion, his new apartment, Mom's unexpected interest in pickleball that had become a borderline obsession. Did you hear about Brittany? Ryan asked as we were finishing our meal. I nodded. News traveled fast in certain circles, and Emma still worked at the venue management company that handled high-end events in the area. Engaged to Winston Hargrove III, I confirmed. Wedding planned for spring at the Four Seasons. Poor guy doesn't know what he's walking into, Ryan said, but his tone held more compassion than bitterness. His family has major investments in tech, perfect new target for the Winters empire. I heard his sister tried to warn him after finding out about your situation. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Really? How'd that go? About as well as could be expected. He accused her of jealousy just like you did with me. I gave Ryan a pointed look. It's part of their playbook, isolate the target from anyone who might see through the facade. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Should I try to warn him, man to man? I considered this. What would you have done if one of Brittany's exes had approached you with warnings? Ignored them completely, he admitted with a rueful laugh. I was so convinced our situation was different, special. Exactly. Some lessons can't be taught, only learned. The waiter brought dessert tiramisu to share, another tradition from our childhood visits to Giovanni's. The Mitchell family dinner last weekend was nice, Ryan said, changing the subject. Everyone seemed more relaxed than I've seen them in years. Our extended family had rallied around Ryan in the aftermath of the canceled wedding, showing a unity that contradicted the narrative the Winters had tried to create. Aunts, uncles, and cousins had offered support in various forms, from job connections to temporary housing options to simply being present during difficult days. We're not perfect, I said, thinking of our family's complicated history, the divorce that had shaped our teenage years, the occasional holiday arguments and personality clashes. But we're real. We love each other through the messiness, not in spite of it. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. That's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. The Winters family presented this perfect image, the wealth, the connections, the social standing. But underneath, there was no substance. No real love or support, just transactions and appearances. Speaking of real connections, I said with a smile, how are things going with Melissa? Ryan's expression softened at the mention of the woman he'd been dating for the past 3 months. They had met through a community service project Ryan had joined as part of his recovery process, a far cry from the elite charity galas where he'd encountered Brittany. She's amazing, he said simply. Authentic in a way I didn't know was possible after everything with Brittany. She's coming to Mom's birthday dinner next week, by the way. Brave woman, I teased, meeting the whole family at once. She's looking forward to it, actually. Says she can't wait to hear embarrassing stories about me from my twin sister. I laughed. Oh, I've been saving the best ones. As we finished our dessert, the conversation turned more reflective. You know what's strange? Ryan said. A year ago today, I was supposed to be starting my honeymoon. Instead, I was drowning in legal paperwork and sleeping on your couch. Quite the upgrade, if you ask me. He smiled, but his expression remained thoughtful. This past year has been the hardest of my life in many ways. The financial stress, the embarrassment, rebuilding my self-image from scratch. But it's also been clarifying, like finally seeing clearly after years of looking through foggy glass. What do you see now? I asked. That real family blood or chosen supports your growth, not your performance. That love should make you more yourself, not less. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. That sometimes the people who really have your back are the ones willing to tell you hard truths, not comfortable lies. I squeezed his hand in return, feeling the full circle moment of our journey. Mitchell's stick together, I said, our childhood motto now carrying layers of new meaning. Always, he agreed. After dinner, we walked to a nearby park where we had spent countless hours as children. The evening was cool but pleasant, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I have something for you, Ryan said, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. A thank you isn't enough for what you did, but it's a start. I unwrapped the gift to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small star that matched the zodiac tattoo we both still had on our wrists. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched. Turn it over, Ryan prompted. On the back of the star, a tiny inscription read, "Truth served." To remind you that sometimes standing firm is the greatest act of love, Ryan explained, and that my big sister by 6 whole minutes is still looking out for me after all these years. We embraced, the journey of the past year culminating in this moment of reconnection and growth. The server's uniform that had symbolized my humiliation had ultimately become the catalyst for my brother's freedom and our family's renewal, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the most beautiful transformations. I hope my story resonates with those of you who faced difficult choices with family members. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love for their own good? Or noticed when someone was trying to isolate you or a loved one? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more family stories that explore these complex dynamics. Thank you for being with me through this journey. Sometimes the hardest family lessons lead to the most meaningful growth. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing in their truth, even when it's difficult, is always worth it in the end.